Also, Holly, again, one of the weirdnesses here, and I know that people don't care about the grey, and as soon as you start arguing the grey in politics, you've lost, all right? Which is why I talk about the political potency of the messaging where Albo is at the moment about they only had 2 jobs, as misleading as that is. But states are in charge of deciding how many people who are Australians can return home to the home airports of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, all the rest of it. Today, Queensland and Victoria have said, no, we want even fewer Australians to be able to return home because the Australians that are anywhere else around the world right now, well, they could bring in the Delta or whatever the other Greek alphabet letters we're going to use of variants of COVID-19. Here in part was Danielle Andrews back at work and saying that it's time to keep Australians away from Victoria.
If it's a choice for me between less people coming back, and yes, there would be pain with that, or locking the whole place down, that's not a difficult decision.
Yeah, screw those Victorians who have every right to return to their own country. As for the Queensland Premier, well, this is what she said.
We should massively reduce the number of returning Australians. It should be for genuine hardship reasons.
So, Holly, let's get this right. The Premier of Queensland believes that Australians should not be allowed to return to Australia unless it's for compassionate reasons. Remember, she runs a system where you're not able to get into her own state to be able to see your dying relatives.
Yeah, I think the compassion card was dealt out by the Queensland government quite a while ago. But luckily for those Australians overseas, New South Wales has been carrying the majority of the load for returned Australians, in fact, well over 50%. So losing Queensland and Victoria, whilst it's disappointing yet again, they're not contributing to the national discussion or national role here of getting stranded Australians home. But thankfully, Gladys, yet again, the beacon light of, shining light of sanity, is maintaining the quarantine program coming back into Australia through New South Wales. I mean, it'd be nice to see if Queensland actually paid the bill yet. Last I heard, they hadn't, but...
Well, no, Queensland, I've got it even better for you, Senator. Here's Queensland. Queensland is refusing to pay the $40 million bill to New South Wales for their citizens being there, but has sent debt collectors out to go after the people who owe the Queensland government money. So again, maximum compassion here. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but Paul, you're expecting, some sort of consistency from the Palaszczuk government. I mean, now Dan's back. Anastasia's got a mate.
Come on, Stephen, defend this. Here we go. Together. Talking point. They only had 2 jobs. Get ready, Nicholas.
No, this is not a talking point. Sorry, let me help you both understand the federal constitution of Australia. John Howard did not say in 2001 the state premiers decide who comes to this country. This is absolute crap that you're both peddling. I am sorry. So let me explain to you the Constitution.
Okay.
There's these things. No, they didn't take it. These things called federal airports.
Credit for it.
Could you please just let me explain some facts to you? These things called airports are on this thing called federal land. And the Federal Airports Corporation, and I'll note the word federal because the federal government control them. The states do not control them.
The states control the health orders.
Lands in Australia, they can control quarantine. But the federal government, when it came to dealing with refugees, didn't phone up the premiers of Australia and say, we're bringing some refugees onto Australian land, we're putting them onto Christmas Island, we're putting them into some of those air bases, into Howard Springs. They didn't ask the state premiers. So let's end this crap that states actually control quarantine. They do not control quarantine. They do not control. They do not control quarantine because the federal government have shown zero leadership and handed it to the states, and the states were stupid enough to say, we'll help you out at first.
Help us
and
out.
We'll get the quarantine system going.
Mate, have a look at the economy and tell me how much leadership...
Let me break you, Paul, you've heard me on this one before.
Here we go.
Holly, please.
There's no such thing as national...
Federal cabinet is no such thing. It doesn't exist in any law of Australia. It's a press release. Peter Credlin and I have been on a unity ticket on this since day one. It was a protection racket by
Good for
the
you.
federal and state governments to protect each other. We've got a consistent position on this. So there is no federal cabinet changing the laws of Australia. Quarantine is a federal government responsibility. The airports are controlled by the federal government. And neither of you two talking for the next 10 minutes can change those two basic facts.
Okay, so Stephen, give me the bumper sticker version. Holly can respond. When somebody comes from England, who's an Australian, and lands at Melbourne Airport, where should they go?
In which context? Currently, at the moment.
No.
they're
I'm
going
saying
to quarantine.
under the system that you've just outlined is the clarity of the Constitution that the quarantining of those people is a federal responsibility that has been shared by the states at the moment as a result of collective decision making.
Shared by at the moment.
Okay. So you believe there should be a dedicated location for those people to go to?
I believe there should have been a year ago when Jane Holton told the federal government to build them a year ago.
All right. And is it staffed by people who get
ago.
to leave that facility, just like hotels?
There's these incredible things, in battlefields they pop up hospitals, in battlefields they pop up centres. It's actually not as complicated as
that's the
Scott
bit of the
Morrison
talking point that you
wants
can't get to, though. See, Senator, that's the bit that the talking point
What
doesn't match
talking
on,
point?
right? Which is that if magically everything stops if there's dedicated quarantine. But of course, the leaks that we have seen from the hotels in every single state has been a worker who comes from it and out. Now, there have been, sorry, I apologise.
Not one leak from Howard Springs. Not one.
But from South Australia.
The only purpose-built facility, not one.
Okay. But the people who are coming into Melbourne, right, who end up going into, in South Australia, remember there was the open door thing. There was a person who tested clean, a couple of days later ended up in Victoria, and that's how it ended up coming in there. They've introduced this new system that a couple of days after they're going to keep testing people. But my point, Holly, is the idea of a little bubble somewhere far away from everywhere would be amazing, but you've got to be next to an airport, next to a hospital if there's any problem with it, and it's got to have workers who don't end up going back into their own communities if they have somehow got whatever version of it is floating around later in the Greek alphabet.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I think we're kind
Otherwise,
of
it's the exact same system as now.
that should have been the conversation should now be moving to vaccinated Australians who are fully vaccinated, can they come home and can they
absolutely
quarantine
want to
at
change the
home?
subject.
No, there's plenty of subjects we should be talking about and still harping on about who agreed what at National Cabinet, which, Stephen, I promise you I'm going to find the video where Dan Andrews is taking all the credit for National Cabinet adopting his strategy of hotel quarantine. I'll find you the clip. It's a gem.
Paul will tell you,
But, mate,
I have
seriously,
said from
you've got to
day
move
one,
on.
it's a joke.
He's never been
and
a fan.
fiction.
He's never been a fan of it, and that's all right. I'm glad that Peter agrees with you, okay? But I'm talking about the system that exists right now, the faults of it. The start of the show, I listed all of these, states that are saying you've got to go to your room despite the fact of their series of mistakes that have taken place, right? And I've also said very clearly, vaccine rollout will determine the future of the government, no question, right? But I don't buy the selective editing of graphs being put out by The Guardian. Forgive me, Australia is not coming last, all right? 66 countries have fewer than 2 million doses floating around. And of course, the joy of this country is while I am frustrated like everyone else about vaccine rollout, I'd prefer to be going slow on that than to be front of the queue when it comes to deaths and cases, which has happened in other parts of the world and still even what's happening in the UK right now. Look, one last one before we go.
Why did ScoMo say we were at the head of the queue?
One last
vaccine rollout.
Well,
why did he say we're at the head?
Can ask him. You may have noticed I'm not the Prime Minister.
He said it.
I just have the initials. Born to rule, right? Okay, let's have a look here. Last one. Beat up of the day was that Joe Hockey and Matthias Cormann, they got together again and they got together. Of course, he's the head of the OECD, former treasurer, former ambassador. But the beat up here was that apparently it is disgraceful for Joe Hockey to be posting pictures of him when so many Australians are in quarantine right now. Now, Stephen, can we also agree that, look, the cigar thing, beautiful, middle stump, consumption of a legal product that in part is producing, $17 billion for the federal budget? But anyway, this has to be beat up of the day, right? Two vaccinated people meeting in a part of the world where vaccinated people can meet is not a news story.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more. There are far more substantive issues that you and I have been talking about and Holly's been talking about. And this is the sort of trivial drivel that actually demeans the overall political debate. I mean, who cares if they caught up? There's absolutely nothing wrong with them catching up. If they're both vaccinated, they're in a country where they're not breaking any laws, then good luck to them. And what Australia should be doing is we want to be like that. I mean, the real problem that the Prime Minister's got going forward is all of the imagery from around the world, of the rest of the world out there getting back to normal life, the things Dominic Perrottet talked about today. And we're going to be sitting here locked in until after the federal election behind closed borders. That's where the problem's going to start to really creep into.
Deeply consistent. All right, and as for cigar smokers, it's okay. It's fully legal. We pay tax. Get over it, okay? No one's wearing a monocle and a top hat. But anyway, even if you are, good luck to you. It's your fashion choice. And last time I checked, it's fairly hipsterish. Anyway, thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Holly. After the break, this story started as a really tough one today, but it ends with the Australian of the day stepping in and helping this Aussie out. I'll explain all, and I guarantee that you will share this video tomorrow when you find it at skynews.com.au. Or in a second.